What is it to be, climate change or nuclear war? It seems to me a bit odd to be worried about climate change when they're talking about nuclear war. And I can't see why even bother spending 1 cent on trying to stop climate change when there's a threat of nuclear war, which is global annihilation of anything worth saving. No one wins in a nuclear war. You might have this amazing weapon you can drop on your enemy's head and decimate their city, but no doubt they've got something similar we can drop on your city and annihilate that city. And therefore it will cascade and get out of hand, and soon no one shall be worried about climate change in what is called a nuclear winter. What surprises me about the recent conversation they had in Glasgow about climate change is no one actually mentioned the fact that although some people like China are talking about Armageddon. We're going to have an Armageddon. I don't know if they understand. I've read Revelations and Armageddon. No one is. No, it's pretty uncertain who wins in an Armageddon. It's pretty uncertain. Wipes everything out and all that. Who wins in that one, we'll never know. And no one can determine the outcome. Some can say it was God or whatever, but put it down to just, we don't know. It's total uncertainty brought about by absolute chaos. And what does anyone win in a nuclear war? Oh, look, we've annihilated their neighbour, our enemy, and what? They've sort of annihilated us as well. And, well, everything we thought we would have won, we've totally lost everything we've ever had. And we've got radiated poisoning everywhere, so we thought we were attained. And then they're worried about climate change. It seems to me a bit of a lunacy to be worried about climate change in a place like Australia, where I live. It's 1% of the global population and about a very tiny percentage, or it's 0.004% of human CO2. And the global human CO2 is 4.5, 4.6%, 4.7% of the whole CO2. So when everyone's pressurising Australia to do something about it, for example, do something about its climate emissions, its CO2 emissions, but it's getting threatened by China to be Armageddon, why bother? Why bother putting any effort whatsoever into something that's totally not worthwhile because someone's going to wipe you all out in some Armageddon? There's no really, why bother? Why worry about having anything but a party? In fact, you might as well party till the end of time, the way it is, because it makes no sense. And the fact that some people can actually threaten that in this day and age with Armageddon, what sort of people talk like that? I mean, it's not very civilised to threaten people with Armageddon because you have a dispute with them. You can't settle down and peacefully negotiate because so you're offended. Obviously, people are offended by the way people talk and present themselves. I'm getting offended by you, I'm offended by you, and I don't get that personally myself. Say what you like to me, I don't care, I'll take it. It's a water of a duck's back when people get so upfront and offended by things said about them. Just take it. It doesn't matter if you're a big enough person, it's not going to bother you. But threatening with Armageddon, annihilation or whatever, satisfies some egotistical urge. But it means that places like Australia, which already has probably a net zero carbon CO2 emissions because the amount of flora it grows each year annually probably equals the amount of CO2 its car emissions make. But that's still basically just academic if we say that there's going to be a nuclear war. Yanks and Americans and arguing again with Russians and China waving around their ships, and it's all kind of looks like a possible scary confrontation. So who cares about climate change? Who gives a damn about? Who cares if it's 2 degrees warmer in 2050 if we're all nuclear radiated and vanish because of some cataclysmic war? What difference will it make how many V8s we drive? Unless the globe, places like Glasgow or wherever these people get together and say, hang on, shouldn't we be have a peaceful negotiation and cooperation on all things, no matter what it is, because most of it gets down to, and most countries get down to a problem of economic irresponsibility by the governments and their central bankers and all these people who, because of asset acquisition, and this seems to be beside the point, but it is actually part of the point, that they've blown up the cost of rents and accommodations and all those things so high, people now have a real problem on their hands. Governments have a real problems on their hands with the cost of running things, because the cost of running governments is so high itself to keep the expensive corporations in surplus billions and trillions, that they're now looking at other ways of having distractions to take the people's mind off how abysmally poorly governments have understood economics. And it all gets down to Adam Smith and his moral philosophies. And this may say, what's this to do with nuclear war and climate change? Well, actually, it's all to do with that, because if people had a proper economic system in the first place, or got one going, what actually slid the scale of charges and rents according to income or something sensible and logical, then governments wouldn't put themselves in such a position. They'd have to create distractions for the people, like threats of nuclear war, and or then we could actually get on with doing something about looking after the environment peacefully and in a cooperative manner. But I don't see why someone like Australia or Glasgow or the UN can't say to China, hang on a minute, don't stop threatening people with Armageddon because we're trying to do something about the climate. If you threaten with Armageddon, which is a nuclear holocaust, then that makes sort of climate change really, it's making it like an Humpty Dumpty story. It makes it like a fairy tale. It makes nonsense of the idea of doing something about climate change when you're threatening nuclear war. Nuclear war is nuclear winter. That's an ice age. That certainly limits the problem of global warming, I suppose. But would someone please make sense in this world, in this leadership? Because that's what's missing. Common sense, common decency, a leadership to peace and cooperation on the things that matter to humanity would show better leadership than leadership that doesn't seem to care about humanity but only its own ego.